Hi, Ava. How are you today?
Alex, I'm fine. How are you?
Well, I can't complain, even though it's been raining, as you know, since the very beginning of the day here in Maryland. So yeah, but perhaps again, that's a good time to have, conversations like this. There's really not much to do outside. So yes, thanks for agreeing to do this interview, or really just a conversation. Of course, I've known you for a very long time, and I
Mm.
know that you successfully transitioned into the next chapter, and I know your story is quite fascinating. And of course, for many people out there, our clients who are perhaps 3 to 5 years away from retirement, or maybe transitioning into their
Mm.
next chapter, I thought it would be very interesting, perhaps even helpful for them to learn from you. So again, thanks for doing this. That said, though, of course, I know you well, but perhaps the vast majority of people who would be listening, they don't know you. So to get us started, please tell us a bit about yourself.
I'm 72. I am divorced with a serious boyfriend. I have two wonderful grown kids.
Hmm. Hmm.
And April 1st, I retired from being a doctor with my own practice after
Yeah.
27 years of my practice. So that was the big transition. After working, a lot of hours and being on call 24/7, very demanding, all of a sudden it all stopped April 1st, and it's been great.
That's again that's what I want to hear in conversations like that. So in terms of again our interview, I thought it would split it in perhaps two parts. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but in terms of your journey to retirement, so perhaps what were some of the most important milestones in terms of your preparation for the next chapter?
Financially was a big one because
Mhm.
when we met in 2011, I just completed my divorce, and financially, I wasn't in great shape. And I met you there. I was referred to one of your then senior partners at the time, who, because I didn't have
Mhm.
a whole lot of finances, shifted me to you.
Yeah.
And it was great because you've been with me every step of the way. Um, I had started my own practice in 1997. And it was solo practice, and I worked very hard. I liked running the practice as well as taking care
Yeah.
of patients. Um, and then the big things that happened were, first of all, in 2011, I bought a house. Um,
Great.
and it
Mhm.
was a great, and first of all, I love my house. And second of all, it was a great investment. I managed to get a very good mortgage because they had these mortgages for doctors where you didn't have to put a lot of money
Uh-huh.
down.
Uh-huh.
Even though I was not a typical resident out of training who had not a lot to put down but have future earnings, it was for all doctors. So I got a great mortgage and then refinanced it on your recommendation a couple times.
Yeah.
So have a great interest rate, and over the years have fixed it up, and it's in a wonderful location. So that's been, sort of my rock through everything I've been through.
Yeah.
And then the transition of my practice back in 2014, I was switched to a concierge model, which
Mhm.
was a very difficult decision because, I had 3,000 patients. I loved all my patients, but it just got to the point that with the having to change to electronic records, the change in
Yeah.
economics, I just couldn't keep going, accepting insurances. So I switched to concierge, which was hugely advantageous. I had a lot more time for my patients. I ended up working just as hard because the fewer patients were much more demanding. But financially, it was a big improvement. I doubled my income. And then
Yeah.
you helped me set up a defined benefit plan so I could save a large chunk of my income every year. I didn't much increase my spending, but I just had a lot more savings to the point, and with the wonderful stock market in the last 10 years, um, I was able to retire. I mean, and I worked till 72, but I'm able to retire very comfortably and have my wonderful house and have had a very fulfilling career. I loved what I did until I hit the wall and I had enough. And now I'm just sort of pinching myself that, now I get to do whatever I want to do. It's wonderful.
Well, that's amazing. I just have to say, and I say this a lot, like if you just mentioned that you're 72, but if people don't know that, it would be hard for them to tell because you are one of the most energetic clients I have. But here, actually, this is one of those points I tend to mention in our meetings with other clients because many people think about transitioning into retirement when in some cases it's perhaps something else. So on the topic of having your own practice, sounds
Hmm.
like you would very much recommend that to someone else, perhaps even outside of the medical field, perhaps an attorney who's working somewhere, billing 12, 14, I don't know, 16-hour days or 16-hour days, right? If they decide to transition and perhaps launch their own practice, besides it being a more fulfilling, part of their life, essentially, there are a lot of, financial benefits of doing that too, like, creating a cash balance plan. So, having your own practice clearly had a lot of impact on you. Is that a
I love
fair
being my own
assessment?
boss. Yeah, I'm a little bit of a control freak. So I loved being my own boss. I loved
Mhm.
flexibility. I loved being
Yeah.
able to, when my kids were younger, I was able to take off when I needed for them. I always worked hard and worked a lot, but I could get away when I wanted to get away. I could be with for the kids when I needed to be. I had two wonderful staff who have continued to work for the practice. I've sold it to a wonderful young lady, and they were wonderful. So I didn't have to have an office manager. I managed things myself because I liked doing that, and because my staff was so good. Um, and I loved what I did. I loved doing what I did for my patients until I just, I got to a point, it was interesting. I thought I'd never retire, and then I hit a wall. I came back from a wonderful safari in Africa,
Oh,
and all my patients were so upset. People were sick, people were demanding, I was working 14 hours a day, and nobody was happy because there was so much. And it was like, I just said, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. And then it took about a year and a half
year and a
to
half.
find someone to take over
Hmm.
and to do the transition so that so it would be a good transition both for my patients and my staff. So the last year and a half were even more stressful because of all, the extra stress of finding someone, going through the negotiations, which were pretty straightforward. And then once I told people I was retiring, they were very upset. Partly because no, everybody thought I was younger than I was. They said, how could you retire? You're
But
too young.
yeah, that's
And I was at
that's yeah,
72. I'm
absolutely right.
entitled, you know?
Yeah.
So, but it was, at the end, I had this wonderful retirement party, and all my
Hmm.
patients, had gotten through the big
Oh,
anatomy and the grief and all the emotions of being upset about my leaving, could actually say, you've been my doctor for 25 years. This has been wonderful, and thank me for it. So it was a wonderful sort of send off. So, yeah, yeah. So,
well, I appreciate you sharing all of that because that actually almost fully answers my next question. Because in many cases, yes, people plan, 5, 7, 10 years ahead of time. That's a big part of our work. But there's usually that trigger point. And
yeah.
it tends to be relatively distinct when it's like everything is going great. And then one day, essentially, you realize that you're ready. And again, Ava, I appreciate you sharing because I do remember that conversation
Mhm.
couple of years ago or so.
Right. I would come in and you do your projections, and it would be for 70, for 72, for 75. And I kept saying, maybe
Yeah.
I'll keep working. And,
Hmm.
and then I said, this is it. And it financially, you kept telling me I could retire at any time, which was nice to know that it was wonderful to not to have to work when I was
Yeah.
done. There's a lot of people in this country who aren't as fortunate I am. There's people who will never retire, or people who, or that are getting in this town retired against their will. Um, you know,
Unfortunately, yeah.
to be able to work as long as I wanted, to be able to quit when I wanted, to be able to retire comfortably. I realize I'm very blessed. I worked very hard, but I'm also
But you
very
worked very
fortunate
hard.
that what I
Yeah.
do is something that is valued financially as well as, societally. Not
That
everybody has that.
And I agree entirely everything you just said. In terms of your story, though, again, which I know very well, you worked hard and you saved very well. I mean, that's such an important part of any financial plan. And the second point is just in terms of the terminology. See, not everyone is into, retirement planning. Many
Hmm.
people actually find it to be rather scary. Again, just like yourself, they've been doing something for decades. They feel passionate about it. They're good about it. But the idea of reaching that point of financial independence, and to me, like in many, new when I work with new clients, every so often I would actually use that term because it's a softer term and many people can associate with it much more. Well, you hit that point, you're financially independent, you want to continue doing what you're doing, that's fine, take a different direction, or you can just stop doing it if that's up to you. Okay, so my next question now, post April
Hmm.
1st, right? So was there a moment when it really hit you? So I'm retired now. What do I do next? Was there a moment like that, or you were pretty much ready for the next chapter from day one?
I was ready, but what was so nice is I love being outdoors. And I have a pool in my backyard and I spend most of the summer there. I'm a gardener, so I love
Yeah,
spring. Everything's coming. And I was so glad that I retired in the spring because, as you remember, we had a wonderful April. And I think it hit me on, oh, the Monday or Tuesday or whatever it was. And it was a beautiful day. And I could wake up and work in my garden and go for a walk. And, I used to sort of hate it when it rained on weekends and it was gorgeous during the week. And, I would be working from early in the morning till 7 o'clock at night. And I would sort of miss the whole day. And it's so
yeah,
watching spring and being able to appreciate as everything came up. That was sort of, I had said, I remember I told you, I don't want to retire in January because winter is depressing and cold. And I want to retire in the spring or the summer when I can be outside. And I think that's helped enormously. I would recommend to anybody. I mean, a lot of people don't have a choice. They have to retire at the end of a fiscal year of some sort. But I could, and I could choose. And it just so happened that the young lady who took over my practice, this was a good time for her. But it was so nice to have it, I could spend all day outside, a lot of the day
doing
outside.
what you're doing.
That made it I was just so relieved to not be in an office all day, you know? Yeah, that was wonderful. So,
That's again great. Great to hear you've shared this with me in the past. And one thing I'll mention, I appreciate that piece of advice, which can actually be very helpful to many. We had a newsletter about it, honestly, like a year ago at this point. There was this study, I don't remember who published it, but essentially it made that exact recommendation, especially if you live like in let's say Maryland and in certain states up north. Try not to retire in like October, November, or December, because next you're gonna have a few gloomy months essentially, or which is a possibility for some people, try to go down south
right.
at first. Again, is much more behind that, but there's something to be said. Yeah, try to retire when it's warmer essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So being
yeah.
outside has been wonderful. Yeah.
Well, and that's again in some sense at least partially answers my next questions, but if you want to go in a bit more detail, so what does it look like for you now day to day? Of course, you used to have a very structured work environment, just like for most busy professionals or business owners. So again, in as much detail as you would like, what does your day look like today?
Well, every day is different, and that's what's really
Okay.
nice. And, I usually have one or two things on the calendar. I'm meeting with a friend or I have an appointment. I mean, I'm sort of getting caught up on doctor's appointments and things that need to be done and things like that. But what's nice is, I mean, like I have to look at my calendar every day because it's not like, I go to work and my calendar would be there and basically my day was the same. But I have to sort of, okay, what am I doing today? Which is, I love. I wake up when I wake up. Usually it's not that, not very late, but I don't have to set an alarm most days.
Mhm.
I mean, every once in a while I have something early. Um, I tell myself the two things I have to do every day is exercise and practice my cello. And other than that, it's sort of like, what do I feel like doing today? And there's always something to do. I mean, doing a lot of gardening, doing a lot of swimming, doing a lot of reading, doing a lot of exercise. I've really stepped that up, which has been
That's
great.
great.
And I feel really good about that. Um, yeah, and I'm spending a lot more time with friends and family and doing a lot more, sort of short trips. I have some bigger trips planned, but um, just being able to, read the whole paper,
That's
so
awesome.
being able to, I'm watching TV for the first time in my life, I think, because I would work till 7 and then I'd go to the gym and I'd practice or I'd do I mean like or I'd come home and I'd be too bush. And now it's like, oh, I'm catching up on all the
Relax.
things that all my friends have been watching. It's kind of fun. I mean, it's nice to do, I don't have to always do, I was always sort of I had a list, I had to get things done. And now I still have my lists and I do get some things done. But it's you start something and you say, I don't feel like doing that. And you say, I can do that tomorrow.
That's right.
It's a wonderful feeling. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This, I mean, again, sounds really good. Just a quick comment from me. It's interesting how you can have two somewhat similar situations, in terms of someone's retirement, but some people very much prefer to have that structure.
Hmm.
Even in their retirement, they have pickleball at a
Hmm.
certain day of the week, and they're doing that essentially religiously, and certain other things, of course, or perhaps someone like yourself. I mean, obviously, you're keeping yourself very busy, but it doesn't sound like you have any kind of strict schedule, which again makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, so my next question, I guess, just still curious, in terms of your old routine, do you actually miss any part of your old routine after decades of doing that, or it's just entirely behind you at this point?
I miss it a little, but not a lot. I'm surprised. I mean, I think people who, I was so involved in what I did. It was so overwhelming. I mean, I would get calls at, 10 o'clock at night,
Yeah, medical.
weekend. I mean, I was always available. I miss my staff. I miss my nurse and my receptionist. I mean, we were together 8, 10 hours a day for 20 years. So I do miss them. And we've gone out to lunch a couple times and they're coming over next, in a couple weeks
Oh, that's
for
great. You stay in
Ming. And
touch.
so
Yeah.
there, I mean, when my nurse started with me, her daughter was a baby. Her daughter is now married. So, I've known them and their families for forever. So, I miss them. Um, I miss my colleagues some,
Right. Yeah.
and I miss a little bit the excitement of, somebody has a new diagnosis, figuring it out, calling my colleagues, getting people better. Um, but but there's more that I don't miss, which is
Fair enough. Yeah.
everybody being so dependent on me, everybody being so needy, the demands, just having to take care of everybody all the time. That
Yeah.
it's nice to just take care of myself. Yeah,
That
I
makes
think it's
it,
nice.
as you mentioned earlier, I mean, obviously you're used to be, passionate about it, but there comes that point where enough is
Enough,
enough. I
enough.
mean, there's always that point. And not to make any negative examples here, but yes, I've been involved in situations when people did not know when to stop. And yes, their financial situation was, in a good shape, but they didn't necessarily get to enjoy it. But that I don't want to go in that direction at this point.
The other thing, there was always this constant worry that I was missing
Yeah.
something, that
Mhm.
I hadn't done something, that there was somebody's, and somebody's health and life could depend on. And it was always that you could always do more kind of thing. And then as I got older, I mean, I still tried to keep up, but at a certain point, you feel like you're just not quite as sharp. A lot that you get to the point you don't want to learn one more diabetes drug. Um, and it was sort of like I was worrying that I wasn't giving 110% anymore and that I couldn't. And that there was that one, Arthur Brooks just wrote this wonderful article in the New Yorker about we get to a certain age and we really aren't as sharp as we were. And I was feeling that. I mean, a lot of what I do depended on caring about people and being compulsive, and that I could still do. But I was beginning to worry that I wasn't quite as sharp as I was, and I wasn't going that extra mile. And so I just got more and more worried about it. And that it was time. It was time. And it's so nice not to worry. If there's a problem, it's not my problem anymore. Yeah.
I think you just raised such an important point, such a sensitive point, I will say, because most people would not admit what you just said. I mean, they realize that they're really good at what they do after decades of doing something, but they also realize that it's becoming more and more challenging to stay on top of things. But there is something, sometimes also hard to figure out what it is, that keeps them doing it, even though they're not at the top. And again, in the medical field, it's probably much more important, so to speak, versus other fields. But still, again, I feel like it's such an important point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so in terms of, again, in terms of those who are listening here, and of course, your journey, your transition has been rather successful. But if you could turn the time back and go back, I don't know, 20 years or 30 years, you decide, would you do anything differently then?
I'm not sure. I mean, again, would I have, you know, gone married a different guy? No, because I got my two wonderful kids, and would I divorce sooner or later? Who knows? I mean, that you can't go back at. I'm really glad I opened my own practice. Well, should I, at some point at some point there was options to have a partner. That might have been nice. Um, but I think, buying my house, having my practice, um, those are, having my kids, those are I mean, having my wonderful kids, that's great. And I was, when they were younger, I was more flexible. So I think I was, no, I, I don't think I would have done, I might have gone concierge a little earlier,
Yeah.
but, maybe, because it was a hard transition. I felt just sort of obligated to all my patients and to not charging people. And, it's hard to ask people for money, but fortunately, I practiced in Bethesda and people could afford it and people felt that it was worth it. So maybe I should have done a little sooner. I would have had a little more money. I mean, but I'm fine. So yeah, I mean, I don't have any big regrets or things I would do differently. Yeah.
But it's again very helpful, and I'll say this again: launching your own practice in the medical field. In your case, again, for those who are listening, can be something else. Because again, I work with a lot of people in their, I would say, early to mid 50s, and every so often, if we're being completely honest, they're checking out bit by bit. They're just doing it because they kind of supposed to. They have to make their 401k contributions. They're saving for retirement. But if you're able to, again, launch your own practice, that is not just financially can be much more beneficial for you, but it also helps with that, with essentially the next chapter of your career, not
Yeah.
just not just
I mean,
your
I was
retirement.
surprised I sold the practice. I mean, I always
Mhm.
assumed that as a primary care practice, geriatrics practice, I would just close and whatever. But, you know, because it was concierge, they found someone for me. She's going to be paying my mortgage for the next 5 years. It's lovely. Yeah, yeah. So that, having something you own that you can sell. But again, I started in 1997. I think the economics of medicine were a little different. It was a lot easier. The hospital guaranteed my loan. I don't think they would do that now.
No, yeah.
Um, the hospital guaranteed my suburban was great. There were more independent doctors, smaller practices. I think in the last 30 years, the economics of practice have changed, but I would still recommend people go into private practice if they can. I mean, it's a lot of, you need to like running a practice, which I do. You need to be comfortable, and it depends on the field that you're in. Like cardiologists, it's very difficult because of Medicare rules. Um, but I liked being my own boss. I liked having my own practice. I
Yeah.
liked, having my own control. So I like choosing my staff, who the people I was going to spend all this time with. But not everybody has, again, that option.
Very important personality trait, because yeah, I hear you. A lot of people have perhaps the skills and expertise, but
Hmm.
there's everything else that is so important. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and then my only remaining question, perhaps even the most important one for those who are listening, again, if someone is 3 to 5 years away from retirement, from their projected retirement date, or perhaps a year away already, in retirement. What kind of advice would you give to these people, given again your experience?
Plan for it financially, plan for it emotionally. I was more than ready. I probably could have retired 6 months or a year sooner and been just as happy. But come up with the succession plan. And I've always had lots of things I like to do.
Mm-hmm.
And again, at summertime, I think come fall, when, I can't be outside all the time, I'm going to have to come up with some more volunteer work or projects I want to do. Or I mean, I have lots of ideas of what I'll do, but I think um, yeah, yeah, come up with things you want to do and
Mm-hmm.
friendships, build the friendships
Yeah.
that, I mean, I have a wonderful guy, I have, wonderful kids, I have good friends, and it's been wonderful to be able to spend more time with friends and
Yeah.
people who were, sort of friends have become better friends. So it takes time to be a friend. And it's nice to have more time for friendships and friendships are getting deeper. And I that's what I really look forward to as I go forward because that's important as
That's
we get older.
That's awesome. And again, this is what would you say, music to my ears, because of course we focus on the financial side of things, which is incredibly important, but it's not everything. There are situations, unfortunately, when people are fully prepared financially and they actually retire, but then they realize that they're not that happy because that vision they had in their head, essentially, it's not materialized to what they want it to be. So
Mhm.
it's really important to think about that part as well.
Yeah, but I want to thank you. You've been, terrific the whole way, encourage me, being on my side, coming up with great advice on a number of different things, talking me down when I'm worried about what's going on in the economy now, and telling me that no, you are safe. You'll be fine, even if the stock market tanks. You've been a pleasure to work with, Alex, and I just want to add that.
Same here, Ava. It's been a great pleasure working with you. Yeah, and thanks for taking the time to do this interview. I very much hope for those who are, I guess, listening to it, it will be helpful. Yeah. Thanks so much. Really
My
appreciate it.
pleasure. Thank you.